Good evening, everybody. I'm Paul Pozzo. I'm the current chair of Amyloidosis UK. I'll kick off with a brief introduction to our organisation, which I've all told you before. We've been a registered charity since 2019, but the group was founded by 3 ATTR amyloidosis patients in 2017. And I'm pleased to say that one of our founders, Vince Nicholas, is in the room today. Vince, give everyone a wave.
Hi.
I didn't write this, by the way. The organisation started out with a focus on ATTR amyloidosis. However, it gives us great pleasure to announce that we have just relaunched and rebranded as the UK's only charity for all amyloidosis patients and their families and carers. Our mission is to create a supportive community for anyone living with in the UK who is affected by amyloidosis, to increase disease awareness while advocating for improved and integrated care across the UK. We have a new website with lots of great information. I urge you to look at it when you can. We are still developing and adding more every month. We also have launched our social media. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and soon on X, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We are excited to have the world-famous Professor Julian Gilmore as our guest speaker this evening. And over to you, Julian.
Thank you very much, Paul. So, in the UK, it's a great pleasure to be here, and I'll just give you a bit of an introduction to the situation in the UK. In the UK, we diagnose roughly 1,500 patients a year with amyloidosis, and you can see from the bar chart there that, roughly speaking, about 40% of that 1,500 have AL, what we call AL amyloidosis, and about 40% are diagnosed with ATTR amyloidosis, which can either be wild type, in other words, non-hereditary, or hereditary. A larger proportion are non-hereditary than hereditary. And then we see a range of other rarer types of amyloidosis at our centre who are diagnosed at the National Amyloidosis Centre. The model that we have in the UK has been very much of a single centre for the diagnosis of amyloidosis and also for follow-up of amyloidosis. The diagnosis is very, very challenging, and not so many years ago, awareness of this disease was minimal. So having a single centre at that stage made a lot of sense. We do a number of specialist tests to establish the correct diagnosis, which, as I say, can be challenging. The plan in the UK from now on is to establish a UK amyloidosis network with a sort of hub and spoke type model, so that the diagnosis and follow-up and care of patients will take place closer to home. I think there will be some patients who still need to attend the amyloidosis centre for the diagnosis, other patients who will be diagnosed and managed entirely in their local network centre, and I think what will develop is a sort of hub and spoke arrangement within different regions in the UK. So the aim really is to develop a network. And you can see on this, on the slide in front of you, that there are a number of different treatments for the various different types of amyloid. In general, for AL amyloidosis, it's a form of chemotherapy. And in general, for ATTR amyloidosis, there are the approved treatment is either a drug called tafamidis or drugs called vutrisiran and patisiran and inotersen. So I think you may want to ask me some questions.
Yes, Steve. Yes, we do. Thank you, Julian. Julian, there's more awareness of amyloidosis in the medical community now than ever before. Can you please comment on why patients are still being diagnosed late or being diagnosed with the wrong disease?
Yeah, the diagnosis of amyloidosis is challenging. It's undoubtedly improved in recent years, but it's a multi-system disease, and the symptoms that a patient initially presents with are often consistent with a lot of other diseases. So patients or doctors don't necessarily think of amyloidosis, and B, even when they think of amyloidosis, it's still a challenge to make the actual diagnosis.
Okay, Julian, you mentioned about expanding expertise to regional centres. What is the timeline for that, and how many centres are actually planned?
So the timeline, NHS England have finally approved the plan for a hub and spoke network model, and the timeline is to establish, we don't know exactly the number of centres, but we think it's likely to be about 4 or 5 centres in the first instance over the course of next year. The aim in the longer term will be to expand the network and have more centres. But initially it'll be about 4 or 5, I think.
Yeah, and Julian, just another question. We feel very lucky in this country to have a National Health Service. And from your knowledge of other healthcare systems around the world, what are the pros and cons of a nationalised health service?
I mean, I think a nationalised health service has a massive pro, and that's the fact that the care is free at the point of care. So you get equal care, theoretically at least, you get equal care, whatever your income, whatever your social status, and you should have access to treatments equally, regardless of your address or your job or etc. So I think that's a huge bonus. I think the challenges are obviously that the cost of healthcare in general is ever increasing, and as you know from seeing the news in the UK, the funding a nationalised health service is a great challenge.
Thank you.
The Amyloidosis Alliance and its member groups have been advocating for a more holistic approach to care for patients and their families. What's your opinion of the value of this approach to care?
Yeah, I think it's massively important, and I think it's something that perhaps in the National Health Service we don't do as well as we should do. I think there is absolutely no doubt that patients, and you know this far better than me, but benefit from support in terms of physiotherapy if they need it, psychological support, nutritional support, and as a multi-system disease, amyloid affects a lot of different organ systems, and often I think that we tend to focus very much on the medical treatment that we're giving, but I don't think we do the holistic care as well as we should. I think that that's a huge role that Amyloidosis UK will hopefully, we need to develop a model of care in the UK that includes all the other aspects of care, not just a drug or an intravenous treatment that the doctor is prescribing.
Thank you. Right, the last bit. Let's have a look. All it leaves me to say really about Amyloidosis UK is our growth and professionalism is starting with, we've got a local office now where we hope to start answering questions on the forum, which, if necessary, send out flyers and all sorts of things to be more professional and hopefully get some part-time staff on a permanent basis. But this will take time. The whole of this strategy, if you like, is really to strengthen the amyloidosis community in UK. So really to tell newly diagnosed people, there is somebody there that can help you. Don't be downhearted all the time. You've got to look forward. That's all I can say about that, really.
And I think from the healthcare side of things, I think the main thing is going to be to develop the network so that patients can get, hopefully what is a high standard of care closer to home, and don't have to necessarily travel as much as they have had to up until now, and hopefully manage to continue with research and innovation, which I think has been a huge part of the Amyloidosis Centre in the UK for the benefit of patients.
Well, thanks very much, Julian. We'll now pass over to the team in France. If anybody wants to ask questions, we've got a couple of minutes apparently. So, fire away.
There are quite a few symptoms that fellow sufferers of amyloidosis have had leading up to the treatment. For example, carpal tunnel seems to be fairly common amongst patients. Do you think doctors might pick it up earlier if they know what all the previous symptoms are? Maybe stenosis? I don't know if that's another one.
So absolutely, you've made a very important point in that there are some sort of red flags, if you like, to help or to try and improve early diagnosis. And along the lines of what you've just mentioned, one such red flag is a patient who has a history of carpal tunnel syndrome and then develops heart failure. And that should make a clinician think, could this be amyloid or could this be ATTR amyloidosis particularly, because those two conditions often go together. The difficulty, as you can imagine, is that cardiologists focus on the heart and they won't even necessarily ask about carpal tunnel syndrome. And I think as clinicians, we're often guilty, myself included, we're guilty of focusing very much on one system and not necessarily, again, the holistic aspect of all of the patient's history.
Okay, right, we're going to leave it there as they go over to the other countries. Thank you very much.
In the future,
Good afternoon. I am Bárbara Coelho. Today I am representing the Brazilian Association of ATTR Amyloidosis in Brazil. I've been part of the association for 7 years now, and I'm the caregiver of a person that has the disease, my mother, who's 80 years old today.
Meu nome é Ana Caetano.
My name is Ana Caetano. I am also a member here from the state of Rio de Janeiro, and I am here. I've been here for 7 years, also working to help these patients.
Meu nome é Hilton Cigales,
My name is Hilton Cigales. I am the treasurer of ABEPAR. I've been with the association for 8 years, and I am also a patient. Hello, thank you for the invitation. I'm very happy. I am a neurologist. I lead the reference center in amyloidosis, which will turn 40 years old this year, and I've been heading it for more than 30 years. And I saw the association being born in 1989, And it's also celebrating its 35th anniversary. Thank you and congratulations for the initiative.
Vamos começar agora a apresentar a nossa.
So we will now start the presentation. We prepared the presentation and we're going to be talking with Dr. Marcia today. And she will talk about the epidemiology of amyloidosis in Brazil.
Bom, então, muito brevemente,
So very briefly,
número exato de pacientes no Brasil.
we don't have the exact number of patients in Brazil. There was a paper a few years ago where we tried to estimate the number of cases of amyloidosis with polyneuropathy, and the approximate estimated number was 5,000 patients. Then more recently, focusing more on amyloidosis and heart disease, Dr. Fábio Fernandes at INCOR led a network of hospitals that collected 644 cases, 505 of them with the variant ATTR, with the mutated ATTR, which is different from what was expected, which is most of the cases with the wild type.
Eu tenho, desde que comecei, mais ou menos alguns 400 e poucos casos. Quer dizer, eu acho até que se chega a esses 5.000, nós não vamos demorar muito, é uma estimativa. Com relação a acesso, né, que me pediram para falar, eu não estou vendo o meu slide. Seria possível ver o meu slide? Eu estou me vendo, mas enfim, vamos adiante. O que nós temos como tratamento disponível em todo o território nacional, depois de um grande trabalho junto com a Associação...
So at the time, together with Dr. Fábio, we had tafamide 20 milligrams since 2018 available all over Brazil to the patients with polyneuropathy, regardless of the mutation. So,
não importa a mutação. Então, por gente com a mutação cardíaca, se
whether there was any evidence of neuropathy, they had access to the treatment. And starting next year, we will have tafamide incorporated into the public healthcare system, 61 milligrams,
com cardiomiopatia,
for patients with cardiomyopathy, but only over 60, which is something bad for our patients that have the variant, because we would like to use a higher dose if we have evidence of cardiomyopathy.
Próximo, por favor.
Next slide, please.
Então, nós temos aprovado já pela Anvisa tanto o patisiran ou Onpatro, quanto o Notercem ou o Texed desde 2019 2020, tanto para estágio 1 quanto para estágio 2, não para cardiomiopatia, e mais tarde o patisiran foi aprovado também para os pacientes pós-transplante hepático. Né? Nós sabemos, vutrisiran, ele já está aprovado também desde 2023 para tratar a dose hereditária. Mas para todos esses medicamentos, o paciente ter acesso a qualquer um desses medicamentos, ele precisa judicializar, o que é um processo lento e doloroso. Slide, por favor. Next slide, please. Bom, enquanto não entra o próximo slide, nós temos alguns ensaios em aprovação, né? O magnitude 1 e 2 com CRISPR-Cas e o acoramidis, tanto para polineuropatia quanto para cardiomiopatia. Ensaios em recrutamento, só o da Alexion.
Trials with an open recruitment, we only have Alexians with the monoclonal antibody, and also some trials that are already ongoing but are not yet recruiting. So CardioTransform at its final stage, NeuroTransform also at its final stage.
Aguardamos a aprovação pelo nosso...
But we're still awaiting approval by our regulatory agency Anvisa and acoramidis for cardiomyopathy.
Depois que a Bárbara falar...
So I stop here, then after Barbara, I can say a few words
enfim,
about our context and our healthcare system and what could be improved.
Eu vou falar primeiramente aqui sobre a formação da...
So first, I want to talk about how our association was created. Abipar has been working for 35 years advocating for patients, and today we have an estimated number of, we have a visibility
visualizações no Instagram
of 3.3 views, 3.3 thousand views on Instagram and 9.2 thousand followers on Instagram. Our association is composed of 11 employees, of which 2 are not carriers.
Membros na diretoria e nosso objetivo
We have members in our board, and our objective is to facilitate connection between doctors and patients and try to promote better quality of life to patients.
também levar informação
And also take information and say more about the disease. We have a lot of patients here in Brazil who are not yet diagnosed. Late management is a serious problem. The first diagnosis in a family, usually it takes a long time and the patient is very ill by the time they're diagnosed.
temos uma falta de acesso a
And we were really in need here in Brazil of access to drugs. We really have a problem of access to drugs. It is a problem. We receive phone calls of patients every day, patients who could have been better managed and who could have be receiving better management. So we have a problem of access here. We also have a lack of specialized centers that
cardiologista, neurologista, onde pudesse englobar
have ophthalmologists, cardiologists, neurologists, because their purpose is to offer all specialties in one center. We are all volunteers,
uma melhora e acesso.
and we are working tirelessly to improve the access and quality of life of these patients.
Bom, eu só posso reforçar tudo que a Bárbara já falou, né?
I can reinforce what Barbara said in relation to a late diagnostic. We were talking about creating a network in the UK. So if you can think that if the UK can't cope with it and they have the need to have a network, so think of Brazil with continental or a country of continental sizes.
Incorporar tudo. Então fica muito
So it's difficult because the investigator has to create a reference or a center of reference, and they find it difficult to meet all their needs. So you can think of a country of the size of Brazil, but we can do it better. And clinical trials take a long time, and the complexities of
genético fica mais
the complexity of the disease is another point to be considered. So we've seen a growing interest of various centers who wanted to incorporate amyloidosis in the treatment, but there is still a lot to be done.
Muitas vezes nós temos que trabalhar.
Many times we have to work more in one center, then we have something localized. As Barbara said, the most important thing is medication. No matter how hard we try to attend and to serve these families, the patient needs medication. So there is a big gap between what you have in the developed countries and in countries like Brazil. So the help of amyloidosis alliances with the involvement with pharmaceutical companies, other bodies, it's very important. So I think that Latin American could have a more compassionate approach in the treatment of amyloidosis.
Em relação, às vezes, aos estudos clínicos que hoje temos vários estudos em andamento.
In relation to clinical trials, we've got different trials in progress.
De medicamento.
The main thing is to work on incorporating medication.
Os medicamentos que têm, eles fazem o possível e o impossível.
They know what medication is available. They make the best they can. They do the best they can to treat these patients. But here we need to work to have medication for treatment.
Eu falo cuidadora também, não só como
I am a carer and also a representative of the association. I've been looking after a patient for 7 years, and I live with amyloidosis every day. So
faz parte da
the treatment is very important. So we need to have better quality of life for these patients. We need to
apenas trazer essa possibilidade para os pacientes.
to bring this to patients, to our patients.
Eu acho que o governo brasileiro,
To enlarge on what she's just said, I think the Brazilian government is aware of this need.
questiona mais os critérios científicos, né? A eficácia.
Scientific criteria is no longer challenged, but this is not a problem. The problem is financial. So the pharmaceutical companies should take into account the needs of Brazil, making available medication with reasonable prices. Thank you, Doctor, for your participation and for my participation, and I thank my colleagues and thank you very much for my participation.
Obrigada.
Passamos agora, caso alguém tenha dúvidas, se não foi concluída a nossa
If there are no questions, we are now concluding our presentation.
Donc, bonjour à tous et bonsoir pour le bonsoir à tous et bonjour pour le Brésil plutôt. Donc moi je suis Arnaud Jacquard, je suis le responsable du centre de référence des amyloses AL pour la France et Jean-Christophe Hidalgo est le président de notre association. Donc en France, c'est 66 millions d'habitants. On a plus de docteurs que le Brésil, mais on n'a pas du tout assez de docteurs et ces dernières années, on a l'impression que le nombre de docteurs et d'infirmières baisse, qui pose des vrais problèmes chez nous aussi pour la prise en charge des malades. Alors on a essayé de montrer
We try to improve and present what we do in our country. We estimate between 5,000 and 6,000 patients suffering AL amyloidosis, and there's more than 6,000 cases per year, which we can improve.
Sauvage, TTR. C'est beaucoup plus que 6 000. Si on en croit les études qui ont été faites à partir des scintigraphies osseuses, on en a fait une à Limoges, il y en a eu une faite en Espagne. C'est peut-être 150 000 personnes qui peuvent vivre avec une amylose TTR sénile en France, avec peut-être un tiers ou un quart des patients qui sont symptomatiques. L'amylose...
The amyloidosis, for the hATTR between 500 and 700 patients, and for the AA type, we've got about 500 treatments. So there are a lot of treatments available.
On peut utiliser beaucoup de traitements. Notre collègue des amyloses...
Our colleague has mentioned some of them earlier for the hATTR. Tafamidis. For the CM-ATTR, we can use the tafamidis. It's starting to show some good results and some new drugs are being evaluated.
Pour les deux formes d'amylose TTR, et en particulier le patisiran, le jutisiran commence à être disponible.
And this is starting to be available. And for the hATTR, we have also some options. And our colleague Julian Gilmore talked about them earlier, the inotersen and the patisaran and tafamidis.
Notre réunion annuelle à Paris.
And we have regular meetings in Paris and exchange on the topic. It's often easier to get access to the medicines in France than it is in the UK. So it's up to the GP's responsibility to do what they have to do, and there are some drugs that we cannot get hold of and not available. In France, we were lucky as we had a plan for disease, which were able to have about 100 reference centers.
Et ça a été vraiment très important dans toutes ces maladies rares pour la prise en charge des malades et pour améliorer la prise en charge des patients. Donc actuellement, c'est un peu compliqué.
It can be quite complex to deal with those conditions. We have different reference centers.
Mon confrère Franck Bridou, qui est néphrologue à Poitiers.
We have Poitiers on the map, who is one of those centers, and 25 competency centers. So we have a network, and they get very close. We get close to the patient. We call it the PMDS, a network of diagnostic. The other reference centers is mainly the GP who will deal with it, to about 20 reference centers, so all the different types of amyloidosis, and there are different types. So
les atteintes cardiaques et les atteintes neurologiques. Donc il y a
we have two reference centers for the neurological one,
avec pas mal de centres de compétences aussi. Et puis il y a
and a reference center for the cardiac one.
Dirigé par Thibaut Damy à l'hôpital Mont-d'Or.
And we have there about 40 competency centers, reference centers, and was very important with a major plan that was implemented in national level is that we are funded. Dedicated funding for networks and export centers, and to have research teams who are being funded, and we can assist the laboratories with their staff. We had a partnership with the Centre of London as well, and we were able to work with the lay person who was looking at the dosing at the London Centre. With all reference centers, we have regular reviews, usually done remotely. This is what we do for the AEL amyloidosis. We also deal with other diseases which are related to toxins, and there are some anti-toxic antibodies. And last year we held a consultation meeting with the French-speaking countries, with Belgium, Switzerland, and the countries from Northern Africa. We had amyloidosis accounting for 60% of the cases. This is an overview of how we look after and how we care for the patients in France. We work as a network. We do have research protocols being developed. And we had the first prospective protocol, both for cardiac amyloidosis or neurological ones, and a lot of the reference centers have been heavily involved in the clinical trials and for those treatments. I will now give the floor to Jean-Christophe.
Merci Arnaud.
Thank you very much.
Quelques mots pour présenter l'association de...
A few words to present our association for the patients in France. So like in the UK, we cover the range of amyloidosis from AL to ATTR and HATTR. Our association was set up 30 years ago and for about 3 years we have a national agreement which enable us to represent the users and the patients. So we have 600 patients, to which are either patient or family, and we have about 2,400 followers on Facebook.
Nos objectifs, donc,
our objectives, of course, is to reduce the time between symptoms and diagnosis, to support patients so that they feel less isolated. It's a rare disease, so it can be a source of anxiety. As it's a rare disease, we also organize some virtual coffees on a regular basis every month based on the different types of amyloidosis. We have faithful patients who are regular patients, regular participants to those meetings that we have online. We often have specialists who are invited and can share their practice and their expertise. We try to broaden the access to the treatment and accelerate the access to the treatment. So what are our expectations for the coming years? Of course, we want to keep on working towards reducing time between symptoms and diagnosis. Like the World Day that we have today is a good tool to communicate and raise awareness, also to be applying pressure and lobbying so that the expert centers can be properly funded. We want to optimize and mainstream multidisciplinary approach. It's not just about treatments. It's also about the awareness for the patient. When you know what your disease is, then you're more efficient and you can fight it more effectively. And there are other aspects which have to be taken into account. To painkillers and antalgic and sophrology can also be helpful for the patients. What you eat or how you exercise or other ways that we can support the patient. So a neurologist who says, okay, if you want to keep on walking, you need to practice and walk as much as you can. So we do what is happening when it comes to treatments at different times of amyloidosis, and some members of our management team is attending some national and international meetings in order to assess the various treatment protocols. Some ultra-rare types of amyloidosis have been mentioned earlier, and we want to carry on doing research on the topic, on those type of rare amyloidosis. This is what I can say about France.
Hallo, hier ist Österreich.
Hello, this is Austria. I would like to welcome you all warmly here. Dr. Nietzsche, who you see next to me, and I myself will be presenting the Austrian situation in a sort of dialogue, the situation about treatment and diagnosis. Is what we are gonna introduce you to. First of all, I would like to introduce the two of us.
Der Dozent Dr. Nietzsche.
So Dr. Christian Nietzsche, he works at the RKH Wien, the General Hospital of Vienna, and is at the University Institute of Internal Medicine. He's one of the leading experts in the field of amyloidosis, and I am president of the association. It's called Amyloidosis Austria.
Der österreichischen Amyloidose-Patienten vertritt. Eine kurze Überblick.
Representing the patients suffering from amyloidosis in Austria. The population of Austria is 9 million. We have a very high number of physicians per capita. So in terms of amyloidosis, the situation is such that luckily the diagnosis time between symptoms diagnosed is reduced. On the other hand, the number of people suffering from it is increasing, especially the amyloidosis in old age. We have currently about 1,200 patients in Austria. And we believe that these numbers are still strongly underestimated. The number of hereditary ATTR patients is relatively stable. We have only a few number of families suffer from this disease in their families. We have got currently 32 patients in Austria, and AL patients. There we currently have approximately 150 cases. We are in the
Wir sind in der glücklichen Situation,
lucky situation that
im Prinzip
Basically, we have medication for all kinds of ATTR patients in stage 1 or 2. We have tafamidis available.
Markennamen Vindakel an alle Patienten anbieten können.
And this medication is also funded by our national health insurance, which is comparable to the British NHS system. So, with regard to patients suffering of polyneuropathy, here usually we have patients with a hereditary form of amyloidosis. So we use vutrisiran and eplontersen as medication here. They are available and they are usually also funded by our national insurance company. With regard to AL, we also have a very positive situation. We have medication available, the most modern medication.
Österreich ist mit seinen
Austria, with its expertise centers, is also in a very good situation. They are allocated to the universities and is present in all trials with new medication. So with this stems from chain line silencers for myopathy patients, like also CRISPR and Cas and depleters, and usually is at least studied in at least 2 research centers in Austria. And just briefly, I'd like to introduce our association. It's called Leben mit Amyloidosis, Life with Amyloidosis. So this association takes care of all patients suffering from ATTR, both hereditary and the old age, and also AL amyloidosis. Theoretically, we would also take care of AR amyloidosis, but in Austria we do not have any case or no knowledge about any case so far.
Unser Status ist, dass wir eine legale Organisation.
Our status is, in terms of legal framework, it is an association with a legal status, such as an association, as Verein, as it's called in Austria.
Die meisten davon.
Currently, we have approximately 110 members, a bit more. Most of them are suffering from ATTR-WT, some ATTR-V, and some AL patients as well. So what are our objectives?
Patienten gut informiert sind.
First of all, we believe that it is of paramount importance to have our patients well informed and to make sure that we transfer this information as good as possible and as fast as possible, together with our doctors with whom you collaborate, to also make sure that the information is usable for our patients and comprehensible. The second objective, which we want to focus on, is our communication between patients that find themselves in such a difficult situation as they usually find them in the case of suffering from a rare disease. Very few people know about it, so it's really positive for patients to be able to talk about it with one another. And of course, we understand us as
zum Beispiel gegenüber den Krankenkassen, aber auch anderen medizinischen Organisationen.
Advocates for our patients between the health insurance and the patients and the doctors.
Möchte ich gerne mich an den Dr.
Now I would like to turn to Dr. Nietzsche.
And I'd like to ask him to talk about the content. We want to do
wo wir uns darüber
structure it in two parts. So we want to talk about what is working quite well in Austria so far, has been working very well, what could be improved. Dr. Nietzsche, may I ask you to report to us from your angle of view what the current situation in Austria looks like and what's positive about it?
Ja, sehr geehrter Herr Thalhammer, vielen Dank auch für die Einladung.
Mr. Thalhammer, thank you very much for the invitation and for being able to talk to you this evening about the situation of amyloidosis and the corresponding infrastructure in Austria. So what's positive?
Ein globales Phänomen.
And that's probably a global phenomenon as well. I'd like to say that in the past 10 years, the awareness
Awareness, wie es so schön
has increased considerably, and this is owed to the non-invasive diagnosis algorithm that we have been able to set up with patients with ATTR amyloidosis.
Zum nächsten Punkt.
This takes me to the second point, which is the generally good availability of
für die Diagnosestellung
the corresponding procedures that are required for the diagnosis of amyloidosis, most of all the bone scintigraphy and also MRI.
Sehr komfortable Situation.
So we have a very comfortable situation with this regard in Austria, actually, because there are numerous centers
auch tatsächlich
that do position to offer these possibilities.
Zu Beginn, Herr Thalhammer, ist, dass wir
and you also mentioned it again, Mr. Thalhammer, we are in a very positive situation in Austria with regard to the availability of the medication for all patients. Most of all, we talk about tafamidis bentakel
ATTR
for patients with ATTR amyloidosis. And here in Austria, this takes me to the next point, by the way. Here in Austria, we were able to offer this medication before it was actually released by or approved by the European
Und hier kann also wirklich jeder
Medical Association. So every patient suffering from amyloidosis will be given this treatment, and this treatment will also be subsidized or funded by our national insurance. And the next item
ist, dass von den Krankenkassen für eine Weiterbewilligung eigentlich
is also positive. We will have regular controls also funded by our insurance
wiederum
in our expertise centers. In Austria, we have a really positive situation because these imaging methods that are required here are available for all patients in various different centers.
Der Erkennen der Erkrankung auch die Anzahl der
Then also the diagnosis, the increasing diagnosis and awareness of the disease has led to an increasing number of centers here in Austria. Then let's look at the negative sides. Of course, here in Austria, and as I also assume in other countries, we are confronted with various different challenges.
Schaffen wir es, dass wir da kurz
And maybe we could go to the next slide so that I can show you the situation here. First of all, and this is certainly not only specific for Austria, in the years to come, we have to make sure that the disease awareness continues to decrease. Amongst cardiologists, we are well on our way here, but it's not only about specialists, but it also it's about GPs and other specialists that have to be educated with respect to the disease. And also we want to really foster the understanding that amyloidosis is a systematic disease, and this is not only addressing our cardiologist colleague, but also other colleagues, experts like orthopedic surgeons and neurologists. So also in order to be aware that amyloidosis might be here at the basis of all the symptoms. So the diagnosis has to be improved. Then I said already that we have a positive situation in terms of the insurance and the insurance payments. The insurances do require MRT diagnosis for the reimbursements of the fact that the disease has been stable. So we want to make sure that these processes are facilitated in future. And in the meantime, we also know that there has been a shift of paradigm. ATTR amyloidosis is obviously not a rare disease, has been found out in the meantime. So
Je mehr Patienten natürlich entdeckt werden, desto eher wird unser
as soon as the number of cases will surge, of course, our health system will also reach its limits, which will be which will be having a negative effect on the diagnosis for our patients or the controls. So we have to be able to tackle that in the years to come. So next item is the improvement of the exchange of information between doctors, and not only doctors, but also between patients, in order to be able to understand patients better, because it will also reduce the anxiety and the fear and the stress connected with these patients. And I think we are getting closer here. But in the next and last item is we have to maybe really rethink therapy. We have to also define which patient groups will be benefiting best from individual medication combinations or individual medication, and how the health system will be able to fund this. I would like to just briefly add something at the end. So in terms of us as patients and patient representatives, what we see as a challenge here is the availability of new medication for the years to get. They are quite expensive so far, and we would like to make sure that all patients have access to these. And we would like to really make sure that the flow of information to patients is improved, and we are now looking into employing a specialized nurse who will be able to give advice and information on the phone. And this should also include a more holistic approach, not only amyloidosis and its treatment, but also lifestyle, nutrition, and so on and so forth. And what's also planned for the years to come is to build up a cooperation with other German-speaking countries, with Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, because we are able to communicate in the same language. I would like to thank you for your attention and would like to say goodbye also on behalf of Dr. Nietzsche. Thank you.